I'm Jen West, professional rebel of delight.
And I'm Dave Wiesdock, sage of creative scaffolding.
And this is shadow casting. So Dave, how's the weather where you are today?
Oh, it's beautiful and cold.
Beautiful and cold. I'm having one of those lucky days today. I went out for my walk this morning and the grass is starting to turn green. And I don't know, for some reason today, it just caught me. Oh, green grass is starting to show.
Oh, yeah, it's definitely starting to turn into spring. You can feel it in the air. It's starting to warm up.
And it's so funny being in Colorado. Tomorrow it's going to be snowing again. So I really took it in today to just, the weather's cool and comfortable and there's no bugs and there's sprouts of green. So nice. I love the changing seasons.
Oh, me too.
Today, I thought we'd go to a deeper quote, a quote that's a little harder to get our heads around. You game for it?
Yeah, I mean, just like the change in seasons, we got to change it up every now and then, right?
Exactly. Okay, so our quote today is by Carl Jung. The quote for today is, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate."
I get chills every time I hear this quote.
I know, as I said it kind of gave me a little bit of chills, especially the end part about you will call it fate. Because you don't know what's happening, it's just the world running around you.
You know, immediately what comes to mind for me is this broken phrase that you hear a lot, like a cliche of "the universe is against me," or "why does everything happen to me?" Just, I like the poeticness of it, of calling it fate. Everyone has something in their life that's unconscious. It's just part of being human. And oftentimes when we're not even aware of those things, let alone trying to redirect that energy of what we're unaware of, it can just run amok in our lives. And so I just think that this quote really succinctly puts a fine point on the fact that if we are unaware or unobservant even of what's happening in our lives, we believe that there's some outside force that's controlling it. And so to me, this really plays with what we talked about before, actually, the spheres, right? The sphere of control, the sphere of influence, and the sphere of concern. And so there are things that are way outside our control, but 90%, I'll even go conservative, 90% of sometimes what we feel happens to us is really us being unaware of how we're affecting our own lives.
Yeah, all of our habits that just happen and flow and create. It's kind of that idea of karma too, because karma is cause and effect. The things that we do that we're not paying attention to, that we don't know exist, that unconscious part of ourselves, other people can see it, but we don't see it happening. And then it just is a pattern that continues. And if that pattern plays out long enough, fate, I mean, it's who you become.
Well, and that's a great point too. This didn't happen overnight. This is a series of, going back to our real first quote, the thoughts, words, actions, habits. I see where you're going with this. Yes. So our thoughts build up over time and they affect how we change our vocabulary and our words, not just with how we communicate with someone else, but our own internal self-talk. And then as our self-talk changes, that changes how we act in the world. And then our actions become habits over time because, again, it's all unconscious. And those habits affect our lifestyle. And then our lifestyle is what we call fate. And so we feel sometimes that we're doomed to a certain lot in life. And really, sometimes you got to peel back that curtain and go, well, where did this all start? And it starts with our thoughts.
Right. And it's so interesting because Carl Jung says, until you make the unconscious conscious, it's unconscious. How am I going to make that conscious? And it's a game that I've played with on doing experiments that put me in positions that aren't the normal, that kick me out of my routine, And that brings up all of that unconsciousness. For example, let's not even change our routine right now. Let's just hit a word and see what that does. So I like to play with words that people often find uncomfortable. So instead of saying we have a habit, what if I said you have a compulsion? How does that hit? And for the audience too, if I said who you are is mostly compulsion, do you recoil? Do you get excited? I know for me, until I really played with this word, it made me extremely uncomfortable. I'm not compulsive. The things I do, I thought about. How about you?
Oh, I mean, as you said, compulsion, I literally wiggled in my chair a little bit. Like that's definitely a uncomfortable word for me.
Yeah. So I hunted that for an entire year. That was one of my experiments. I'm going to look for my compulsions. And when people said, what's your word of the year? Because normally it's an affirmation thing, like, what's your year going to be about? Compulsion. And it's like, wait, what? And so that's one of those things. That's where you get into it. It's not even a thought, it's a body recoiling. And as I played with it, I realized there were certain times of day that my body decided it wanted to eat. Not that I was hungry, it's just that at that time, my body was used to eating. And I get all the hunger urges, even if I wasn't hungry, even if I had eaten a little while ago. At that time of day, I compulsively wanted to eat. It was fascinating. I became very curious about that.
And to me, that kind of really centers on something that I love, which is just having a sense of curiosity. I feel like that might be a great first step. See, you made a whole year about compulsion, but it was really the curiosity of the compulsion. As things showed up in your life, you were like, okay, well, why is this? What's going on in my body? You brought up the example of, there was a certain time of day where you were hungry. It wasn't just, I'm not actually hungry. It was, all right, I'm feeling hunger. Am I actually hungry? Or is this the time of day that I normally eat? Like, what's going on in my body that's causing this sensation, this thought, this feeling? And then as you start to untangle that, that's where the curiosity really comes to play, and where you can see maybe where the unconscious is becoming a little conscious. Leaning more into kind of the business world a little bit, there's this cliche, I guess, of you see it where a lot of companies maybe fail because leaders get in their own way, the saying of sometimes leaders need to get out of their own way. And I think that part of this is you build a brand, you build a business. Maybe it took 2 months, maybe it took 2 years, maybe it took 2 decades, but you spent time building something, creating a business. And what often happens is what worked in one instance doesn't always work. Things change, things evolve. But if unconsciously you're still operating from what worked before and the business starts to fail, sometimes they call that fate. Oh, the business was destined to fail. Or was it that you were becoming unconscious in how you were operating your business? And so you kind of got in your own way, and it's directing the life of that business. And so people will call it fate because they call it this business cycle, right? Of how businesses do well. And then there's like a bad economy, or there's a rough spot in that industry. And oftentimes where businesses really succeed and thrive is when they can make that unconscious conscious, and they're able to adapt. They're able to get curious. They lean into the uncomfortableness of what's happening, and they have a little bit of courage and willingness to look at this. And so that's what comes up to for me when you bring this up in the body sensation too, of you have to acknowledge first that there's a compulsion, as I wiggle again just saying that word, but you have to lean into that and just find one thing and really dig into it, really get curious, analyze all the angles of it, because it's not just that you have a compulsion, let's say, to eat. There's all these triggers and factors that contribute to that time of day, when your last meal was, your blood sugar levels, underlying conditions or within the body. And as you start to peel those layers away, hunger, which can often be unconscious, starts to become conscious. and you can direct the fate of how hunger affects you, whether that's gaining weight. There's still an obesity crisis in the country. People talk about blending both of these ideas of, a lot of jobs are sedentary, sitting at work, and they call sitting the new smoking. And okay, so how does hunger and sitting play together? Those can be two unconscious things. Most people sit to work at their computer, but when you start to get conscious about these things, it's like, oh, I could stand at my desk. I could go for a 15-minute walk every 2 hours that I sit. You start to redirect the fate that you're quote unquote assigned because you're leaning into what's unconscious for you.
Exactly. And going back to your business example, it brought up another quote that I don't have, but paraphrasing it, the thing that got you to where you are isn't going to get you to where you need to go. And that's kind of what happens in businesses. And that's paraphrasing, and I don't know who said it. It's all about, yes, you built a business and you worked really hard and you got all of this stuff, and the habits that you put in place got you to where you need to be to get there. But once a business is in its place, you have to change. You have to adapt. The habits need to be reconsidered and messed with, because infinite game. You got to change the rules, change the way you interact. And yeah, it's so fun because it did work. You did use it. It did help you. Same thing with diet. There's a certain thing that you do to lose weight or to get healthy. But once you get to your goal weight or your goal strength, you have to change gears and change your mindset. It's not as strict. And you have to flow into the new being without falling back into an old habit. And what I learned with playing with the word compulsion and habit is something you build and you're conscious of and you're choosing it, and then you're getting your body into it, making that so that it becomes the norm. But a compulsion is something you don't even recognize is there. And it's just happening to you. Like people say, only eat when you're hungry. But if your body isn't actually responding to its hunger, it's responding to its habit, its compulsion, the fact that the body knows what time it is, and it's Pavlovian, where it's like, oh, it's that time. My body says eat, and it just gives you the wrong signals because it's compulsion instead of an actual real. And you have to break all those, and it's so hard if you don't know they're there. Yeah.
I fully agree with everything you're saying, Jen. And to me, this is really a very deep subject that takes a lot of time to sink into. And it's something that, while it is a mental exercise, it's something that you have to go out and do. So what I think would be really cool is maybe coming up with an exercise for the audience, something that we could say, okay, for the next month, find something that you feel is unconscious that is directing your fate. Listen to your self-talk, look at your hunger, look in your business sense if you're listening to this from more of the business world. And for a month, just track that compulsion. You don't have to change it. You don't have to make a decision about it or anything like that. Just leaning into it and seeing where it shows up and getting curious and making notes about it. Because oftentimes, at least in my experience, and maybe you have a little bit of a different experience with this, but just becoming aware of something is often what creates the most change. Creating a changed pattern of behavior comes from changing the thoughts first, like we talked about with the first quote.
Yeah, you got to open up the space to become aware of the self. I'll give one example just as something that somebody could do. With your phone, if it's on and a text message comes in and it bings, ignore it and just feel that. Because I know when I'm sitting in the car and I'm driving along and that thing goes, and I know a text came in, oh, it just tightens my body for a second. And becoming aware of that allows the space, and then it becomes dumb that I just want to answer it immediately. It's like, it can wait. It can wait till I park. It's fine. So just even if you're walking and you could look at the text, don't. Just feel it.
I love that.
Audience, we would love to hear, do you have any little exercises that are simple and quick that can make the unconscious conscious? Yeah, because we're rewriting our fate, people.
That's right. And thank you guys for listening. And make sure that you like, comment, and subscribe to our podcast.
Yeah. And until next time.
See ya.